A hero's story rarely starts with a cape and a grand entrance. Sometimes, it begins in the quietest, most ordinary place you can imagine. For the passengers on Transcontinental Flight 295, a routine trip from Frankfurt to Newark, heroism wasn't even a thought. It was just a Tuesday. Outside, the sky was a perfect, endless blue. Inside the Airbus A321, it was all the gentle hum of recycled air and the muffled drone of engines pushing them across the Atlantic at over 500 miles an hour. Some people were reading, others were lost in movies, and most were just trying to get comfortable. There was a sense of calm, a quiet trust in the machine and the anonymous pros in the cockpit. They were all suspended 7 miles above the earth, but it felt as safe as a library. In seat 14B, a woman sat with her eyes closed, the hood of her dark gray sweatshirt pulled up. To anyone who glanced over, she was completely unremarkable, just another traveler trying to catch some sleep. Her name was Zola Harris, and she was trying her best to be invisible. She was on leave, heading home after a brutal 6-month deployment that had pushed her to her limits. All she wanted was to fade into the background and feel solid ground on the other side of the ocean. For once, the drone of the engines was a lullaby, a welcome change from the violent roar she was used to. But peace, as she knew all too well, is often a temporary luxury. Hook, and just like that, the tranquility was shattered. It wasn't slow. It was a sudden, violent jolt, a sickening lurch to the right that slammed everyone against their armrests. The cabin let out a collective gasp. That gentle hum of the engines was suddenly joined by a horrible grinding sound from somewhere below them. The lights flickered, then came back on, but the damage was done. The spell of normalcy was broken. Nervous chatter turned into a rising wave of anxiety. Flight attendants, their faces calm but their eyes showing a spark of real fear, started moving through the cabin. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. The captain will provide an update shortly. But the update didn't come. Instead, there were a few agonizing moments of silence. Then, the intercom crackled. It wasn't the captain's cool, confident voice. It was someone younger, his voice strained and cracking with a panic that sent a chill through the entire plane. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first officer. He paused, taking a shaky breath. The captain is incapacitated. We are experiencing a major flight control malfunction. Another terrifying pause. Then came the words, a desperate, unbelievable question that no one would ever forget. Is there a fighter pilot on board? We need a fighter pilot in the cockpit immediately. Section 1, The Gathering Storm. The co-pilot's words just hung there in the air, sounding completely insane. The cabin fell silent. Passengers looked at each other, confused. A fighter pilot? It was so specific, so over the top, it felt like a line from a bad movie. And that shock quickly melted into raw, contagious fear. A fighter pilot? Why would he ask for a fighter pilot? A woman whispered, her voice trembling. What is wrong with the plane? Another man demanded, his knuckles white. In first class, a man in an expensive suit, who'd been loudly complaining about the Wi-Fi just minutes before, let out a short, cynical laugh. A fighter pilot? Is he serious? He said to his companion. This isn't a Tom Cruise movie. They need an airline pilot, someone rated for this plane. The kid in the cockpit is just panicking. He leaned back in his seat, trying to project an air of being smarter than everyone else, including the crew. But his skepticism was a luxury nobody else could afford. The flight attendants, led by a veteran purser named Maria, were moving with a forced calm. Their training covered everything from fires to medical emergencies, but nothing like this. Asking for a fighter pilot was so far off script it meant they were in a truly terrifying, uncharted crisis. The co-pilot's voice came back, even more desperate. Please, he begged. We have experienced a dual hydraulic system failure. We are losing flight controls. If there is any pilot on board with experience flying an aircraft with compromised controls, please, identify yourself now. Now, to most of us, hydraulic system failure is just technical jargon. But to Zola Harris, those words were a potential death sentence. Her eyes had snapped open the second she heard the first officer's voice. All her exhaustion vanished, replaced by a surge of cold, pure adrenaline. It was a feeling she knew well, the same hyper-awareness that hit her seconds before a combat mission. The jolt. The grinding sound. The co-pilot's panic. And that one, terrifyingly specific request. A fighter pilot. Zola knew exactly why he'd asked for one. A commercial airliner like an Airbus is a fly-by-wire marvel, designed for stability, with computers constantly smoothing things out. Losing one hydraulic system is a serious emergency. Losing two is a catastrophe. It meant the computers were losing their grip. It meant the plane was about to become fundamentally unstable. Asking for a fighter pilot wasn't panic, it was a Hail Mary. The co-pilot didn't need someone who knew the Airbus's software. He needed someone who knew how to fly a machine that was actively trying to kill them. Someone used to wrestling an unstable aircraft to their will, someone comfortable with G-forces and flying by pure instinct when the computers give up. He needed someone who could fly a brick with wings. Zola's heart hammered against her ribs. She did not want to do this. A deep part of her was screaming to stay in her seat, to stay anonymous. She was on leave. She was done. All she wanted was to go home. But as the plane gave another sickening shudder, she knew that if she did nothing, home might not be an option for anyone on board. The choice, as it always was in her line of work, wasn't really a choice at all. Section 2, the unlikely volunteer, the seconds ticked by. The co-pilot's plea echoed in the silent cabin. Everyone scanned the faces around them, desperately looking for a savior. But nobody moved. Hope began to fizzle out, replaced by a cold resignation. The businessman in first class just shook his head. Nobody, he muttered. Of course, there's nobody. The lead flight attendant, Maria, started walking down the aisle, her expression a mask of despair. As she passed row 14, her eyes met Zola's. In that split second, a silent question passed from Maria, and a silent, firm answer came back from Zola. Zola gave a single, sharp nod. It was tiny, but it was enough. Taking a deep breath, Zola unbuckled her seatbelt. The click was deafening in the tense silence. She stood up with a fluid grace that was a stark contrast to the frozen panic all around her. Dressed in worn jeans and a hoodie, she looked more like a college student than the answer to a prayer. The businessman in first class turned to see what was happening and let out a loud, disbelieving scoff. "You," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What are you going to do?" "Honey, they asked for a fighter pilot, not someone who's seen the movie." Zola didn't even look at him. Her focus was absolute. She'd faced enemy fire and landed on runways you could barely see through smoke. A condescending jerk was less than a fly on her radar. She walked toward the front galley, where Maria intercepted her. "Ma'am, please return to your seat," the flight attendant said, her voice a mix of duty and confusion. Zola stopped right in front of her. She didn't have time to be gentle. Her voice was low, calm, and carried an authority that was impossible to question. "My name is Zola Harris," she said, locking eyes with Maria. "I'm a major in the United States Air Force. I am a certified combat pilot. I fly the F-35 Lightning II." The words hit Maria like a physical force. She stared at the young, unassuming African-American woman in front of her. The doubt in Maria's eyes fought with a desperate need to believe. "Your identification," she whispered. "I need to see it." Zola pulled out her wallet and handed over her military ID. Maria took it with a trembling hand. There was the title, right under her name. Major. U.S. Air Force. The doubt in Maria's face was washed away by a wave of relief so strong it almost buckled her knees. She looked up at Zola, her eyes shining. "This way, Major," she said, her voice suddenly steady. "Follow me." As Maria led Zola toward the cockpit, a wave of whispers followed them. The businessman who had mocked her sat frozen, his mouth hanging open in utter astonishment and dawning shame. Zola was oblivious. As she walked those few steps, she was carrying the legacy of women like Shauna Kimbrell, the first African-American female fighter pilot, and Teresa Claiborne, a pioneer in both military and commercial aviation. She was part of an incredibly exclusive club, and a member of an even smaller, more elite sorority of black female pilots. She was carrying all of that, and the weight of 200 lives, as she reached for the cockpit door. The cockpit was a technological nightmare. Alarms shrieked in a symphony of failure. Red and amber lights flashed everywhere. The captain was slumped unconscious in his seat, a flight attendant fumbling to give him oxygen. On the right sat the first officer, David. He couldn't have been more than 25, his face slick with sweat and twisted in terror. His hands trembled as he darted between switches and screens. When the door opened, he looked up, his eyes wide and hollow. You're the one," he stammered. Zola didn't waste a second. Her gaze swept across the screens, her brain instantly filtering and prioritizing. Master warning flashing. Dual hydraulic failure, green and yellow systems gone. They were flying in what's called alternate law, meaning the computer's safety net was gone. They were one step away from direct law, where the link between the pilot and the plane is direct, raw, and incredibly unforgiving. She slipped into the jump seat behind them. "What's your name, co-pilot?" she asked, her voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "David," he breathed. "David, report. Sequence of events. Now." Her tone wasn't mean, but it was an order. It jolted him out of his panic. He recited the events, the bang, the yaw, the autopilot disconnecting, the captain passing out. Zola took it all in. "I have control," she stated, leaving no room for argument. For a split second, David hesitated. "But, you fly F-35s. This is an A321. The systems, it's completely different." He was right. Flying an Airbus is like managing a computer system, flying a fighter jet is like strapping yourself to a rocket. Zola's reply was sharp. "It's an aircraft, David. It has wings and engines. And right now, it's in distress. Our job is to calm it down. Forget the philosophy. We're flying by hand now. Call out my airspeed, altitude, and vertical speed. Constantly. Be my eyes." She disconnected the autothrottle and silenced a new alarm. Her left hand rested on the side stick, her right on the throttles. Her movements were a series of tiny, constant corrections, a dance of pressure and release. She wasn't commanding the plane, she was listening to it, feeling its every tremor through the frame. She was flying it by feel, by instinct, the way she flew her fighter. The crippled airliner was a wild animal, and she was about to tame it. Section 4, the fighter pilot's gambit. For a few minutes, they found a fragile stability. Zola was holding the plane in the air by sheer force of will. But the aircraft was still dying. The final hydraulic system, the blue one, was now failing. A new, high-pitched alarm began to scream. The plane started a slow, steady bank to the left, a gentle roll that would eventually flip them upside down. Zola pushed the stick to the right. Nothing. She applied right rudder. The plane just shuddered. "It's not responding," David yelled, his voice cracking again. "We're going in." In that instant, Zola's mind flashed back to a no-win simulator session from years ago. The solution was a desperate, almost mythical trick of airmanship. "David. Look at me," she commanded, her voice like steel. "We are not going to die today. We are going to fly this plane using the engines. Do you understand?" David stared at her. Asymmetric thrust. On an airliner? Major, that's all we have left, she cut him off. I need you on those throttles. You're my right hand. When I give a command, you do it instantly. No hesitation. Copy. Seeing the absolute certainty in her eyes, David could only nod. I copy. So, what is she doing? Imagine trying to steer a canoe, but instead of a paddle, you can only use your hands to splash water on either side. It's crude, dangerous, and puts incredible stress on the airframe. It's a last-ditch maneuver from a bygone era of aviation. Increase thrust on engine 2 to 60%. Decrease engine 1 to 40, Zola ordered. David moved the levers. The plane groaned in protest. In the cabin, passengers were thrown to the side. But the roll stopped. Then, ever so slowly, the left wing began to rise. It's working, David whispered. Don't celebrate yet, Zola shot back. Now, let's get this bird pointed towards land. For the next 10 minutes, they were locked in an intense ballet. Her commands were short, precise. Engine 2, 65%. Engine 1, 35%. She was painting a masterpiece with the crudest tools possible, using engine thrust to make the wounded giant turn and descend. The Airbus was heavy and slow, a bus compared to her F-35. But today, she was going to make this bus dance. Then, with the plane stable and aimed for Gander, Newfoundland, Zola picked up the PA microphone. Her voice, amplified through the cabin, was the definition of calm. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, this is Major Zola Harris from the flight deck. We've had a significant technical malfunction. However, the situation is now stable and under control. We are cleared for an emergency landing at Gander. The crew will be preparing you for landing shortly. I know it's been stressful, but I assure you, we will have you on the ground safely in about 15 minutes. In the cabin, the effect was profound. The panic was tamed. Her calm, confident, authoritative voice had done what no automated message ever could. It gave them a leader. It gave them hope. The businessmen in first class just stared at the ceiling, humbled and speechless. They didn't know who Zola Harris was, but they knew that voice. It was the voice of salvation. Section 5, The Hero's Landing and Resolution. The coast of Newfoundland appeared on the horizon. On the ground in Gander, an airport famous for being a sanctuary for flights in trouble, emergency crews were already in position. The final approach was the ultimate test. Landing a 90-ton aircraft using only engine power is like trying to thread a needle in an earthquake. 500 feet, David called out. Airspeed 145 knots. 400 feet. You're slightly left of the centerline. Copy, Zola replied. More power, engine 2. Just a touch. The runway rushed up to meet them. 50. 30. 20. 10. This wasn't a buttery smooth landing. It was a firm, brutal arrival, the tires screaming as they slammed onto the asphalt. The plane bounced once, hard, then settled. Zola hit the reverse thrusters, and the engines roared one last time. The jet shuddered but stayed straight, finally rolling to a stop in a cloud of tire smoke. They were safe. For a full 10 seconds, the cockpit was silent, except for the dying whine of the engines. David slumped over his console, shaking with relief. He looked at Zola, tears streaming down his face. How did you do that?" he whispered. Zola took a long, shuddering breath. "We did it, David," she said softly. "We did it." Then, from the cabin, a sound started to build, a ripple of clapping that grew into a thunderous ovation, a wave of pure gratitude washing over the cockpit door. As Zola finally deplaned, the passengers were waiting. A path cleared for her. The 200 people she had just saved stood and stared. The businessman from first class, his suit now rumpled, approached her. "Ma'am. Major. He began, his voice thick with emotion. I was a fool. I've never been so happy to be so wrong. Thank you. Zola just gave a small, tired smile and shook his hand. We're all just glad to be on the ground, she said. She didn't stick around for the spotlight. She deflected the praise, insisting the co-pilot and crew were the real heroes. She found a quiet corner, pulled her hoodie back up, and closed her eyes, once again disappearing into the crowd. The hero had arrived when she was needed. And now, her job was done. Conclusion and CTA. Now, before you go searching for news reports on Transcontinental Flight 295, I have to tell you, the story of Major Zola Harris is a work of fiction. But the heroism it represents? That is 100% real. It's a tribute to the pioneers who smashed barriers of race and gender to become the best of the best. Women like Tammy Jo Schultz, whose cool command saved Southwest Flight 1380, and trailblazers like Shauna Kimbrell and Teresa Claiborne, who proved that excellence has no color or gender. Their legacy, and the fictional heroism of Major Harris, are a powerful reminder that heroes are all around us, often hidden in plain sight. Competence, courage, and grace under pressure are what make a hero. So the next time you're on a flight, soaring miles above the clouds, just think about who you might be flying with. If you found this story inspiring, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What part of Major Harris's incredible feat of airmanship impressed you the most? Thanks for watching.